The next central nervous system topic that we are going to study is the ventricles of brain. Now, these ventricles are not to be confused with the ventricles that we studied in heart. These are the cerebral ventricles we are talking about. Now, try to recall what were the ventricles which were present in the heart, what was their function, what were they all about. They were empty spaces basically in which the blood got collected. Over here also, the cerebral ventricles that we are going to discuss, they are nothing else but hollow cavities inside which the parts of the brain are located. Now, these ventricles are 4 in number. You have to remember that there are 4 ventricles. Now, brain is somewhat spherical structure, so you can make it out that there are 2 ventricles that are present, 2 lateral ventricles which are present in the cerebral hemisphere, which house the cerebrum, basically the frontal part of the brain that is present in the 2 lateral ventricles. They would be the hollow cavities inside which the cerebrum would be located. Then there would be a third ventricle which would be present as a vertical slit at the midline between 2 lateral ventricles. Now, supposedly this is the brain that I am talking about. Now, this is one ventricle, this is the other ventricle which houses the cerebrum basically. There is a third ventricle that lies over here, and the fourth one which has the location, or which is the area between brain stem and cerebellum. This is the arbor vitae, this brain stem, the cerebellum supposedly. So, there is a ventricle which connects the brain stem, not connects won't be a right word, which houses the brain stem till cerebellum. So, we have 4 ventricles which are 4 cavities inside which various parts of the brain are housed, and the important role of these ventricles is that the membrane present in these ventricles is responsible for secreting a very important fluid that is known as cerebrospinal fluid. Now, this cerebrospinal fluid is secreted by the ventricular walls and the membranes, and it is present in spinal cord as well as the brain. So, we get to know that the 4 cavities of the brain are quite important because in those areas we have the main components of the brain which are housed. Now, talking about the cerebrospinal fluid, that is an important topic, yet more important than the ventricles itself, but we study cerebrospinal fluid along with ventricles only because it is secreted abundantly by ventricular membranes. Now, what is CSF? I am going to use this term for further references, cerebrospinal fluid, or in short we say it CSF. This is the extracellular fluid which is continuously circulating through subarachnoid space that lies between arachnoid and pyometer. So, basically this subarachnoid space has the extracellular fluid called cerebrospinal fluid which is continuously circulating within it, and it is produced by the membranes in the roof of ventricles, and whichever has been produced in the roof of these ventricles, that would be circulating in the spinal cord itself. The spinal cord will not secrete, there is no such ventricle in spinal cord which would secrete cerebrospinal fluid, but it would be circulating continuously. That is why it is being secreted by the membranes, and then further the circulation takes place. In a human nervous system, as much of 80 milliliter to 150 milliliter of cerebrospinal fluid is secreted in a normal individual. That much is present in normal conditions. Now, let's talk about the composition of cerebrospinal fluid. I hope you didn't find this ventricles thing short enough, because they are basically cavities, and because we have understood by now the main parts of the brain, so we get to know by the topic of ventricles that where these parts are located and which part is located in which ventricle. Now, the 2 ventricles that we discussed, the lateral ones, they are completely housing the cerebrum. The remaining ones would be housing the brain stem, thalamus, hypothalamus, and rest of the regions which are part of the brain, which are part of midbrain, and then comes the hindbrain. So, this much is enough for understanding the ventricles. What is important is you need to remember the components of cerebrospinal fluid, where it is located, how it is secreted. That part is to be remembered and cramped. So, coming to the composition of cerebrospinal fluid, it is quite similar to that of plasma. So, you know what plasma plasma is all about. It is blood plasma is more of water and few dissolved proteins and some amount of dissolved gases which could be present. But the difference in cerebrospinal fluid would be that the composition would be quite similar to blood plasma. The difference that lies is that it would be different from the blood plasma in having a lower content of both proteins as well as cholesterol. So, there would be lower content of proteins and cholesterol in the cerebrospinal fluid as compared to that of blood plasma. Now, what is the function of this cerebrospinal fluid? Why do we have this fluid in that is continuously circulating in our central nervous system? There are 4 major functions which are enlisted over here. One by one we are going to understand what is that. First function is providing protection. Now, how does this cerebrospinal fluid provide protection to the brain and the spinal cord? It is providing protection in a way because it is a shock absorber. Whenever there is a fluid which is present, it acts as a shock absorber. So, the delicate parts of the central nervous system are protected by this CSF. Secondly, it provides buoyancy. Now, what is buoyancy? Supposedly, you throw a ball in water, or you throw a heavy water bottle. Supposedly you have a water bottle and you throw it in the water, or you have understanding of buoyancy, like if you have to lift a heavy object in water, it appears lighter as compared to when it is to be lifted in air. So, this is what buoyancy is all about. You would be knowing it in a better way from your knowledge of physics. How does buoyancy benefit the central nervous system, or how is buoyancy an important factor for central nervous system by this cerebrospinal fluid which is being provided? This buoyancy reduces the pressure at the basal level. Okay. Now, how much the weight of brain is reduced? You know that brain weighs around 1.4 kg, but due to the cerebrospinal fluid, there is reduction of as much as 0.18 kg. So, what happens is that the base that is to be under a lot of stress and strenuous weight that comes on the base of the brain, that is reduced by this buoyancy factor. Now, then there is another factor, that is excretion. Now, there is a one-way movement of cerebrospinal fluid towards the blood, and lot of harmful metabolites which are produced in the brain, they are thrown into the blood, and in this way the cerebrospinal fluid collects those metabolites, it goes to the blood, there is one way passage, and it throws its metabolites and other drugs which are harmful for the brain into the bloodstream, and they are excreted out. Another important function of CSF. Coming to the last function, you know that brain has many endocrine glands, not many to be precise, there are 3 or 4. 3 basically. So, the brain has to make sure that whatever is being produced in the endocrine part, that reaches far corners of the brain, and it is cerebrospinal fluid which acts as the medium through which this endocrine system hormones whichever are being produced, they would reach the far corners of the brain. So, with this we have an understanding with now that we are ending this lesson. By the end we get to know that there are 4 cavities in the brain. Those cavities are responsible for secretion of cerebrospinal fluid, and cerebrospinal fluid is very important for excretion and safety purposes as for being provided to the brain, so that the buoyancy and this shock absorbing property does not harm the main brain components, and at the same time whatever excretion is required along with blood, that take place. So, this is all about ventricles and cerebrospinal fluid.